Okay guys, the front's done and we're moving to the rear of the car. So this is an F13 M6. All the videos that I watched dealt with M5s just because M6s are, I guess, kind of uncommon, and there's not that much material out there, and part of the reason why I'm making this video. So on the M5s, you actually have to go from the inside of the car and dislodge the speaker grill and all of that stuff. You'll see it if you watch an M5 video. I looked in there, the back of the M6 is completely different. I believe that the shocks are located inside the trunk, just like most cars that you would work on. In order to get to those, you're going to have to remove these interior side panels from the trunk. And in order to do that, I went ahead and just took out all of the floor stuff that's in the trunk. All that stuff just comes out really easily. And now I'm down to this panel here, which needs to come out because it's blocking these panels in. And this rear panel here is blocking that panel from coming out. So what I did is I popped all of these little pins loose, basically just using a screwdriver and these guys. I didn't cut anything or destroy anything. I just had to use this to pry those little pins out, and all of those pins are there. And the last thing, these things are screwed in. So basically I just used a screwdriver and a hammer in these little grooves to knock this thing loose, and then they screw right out. So hopefully that's all that's holding this panel in, and this will come out next. Alright guys, as I suspected, you will be able to get 2 of your shocks from the trunk on an F13 M6, that's the coupe, by going through the trunk. So we got the side panel out. I'm not going to go ahead and describe every single step. If you see a pin in there, you remove it, and once you've removed all your pins, that side panel slides right out. You see this big foam insulation block here. There's no need to remove that because they've actually gone ahead and put holes in it where the screws are for the top of your strut. So it's going to be difficult to see, but at least you can get a tool on that. So we'll see how that affects me later on when I go to put this thing back together. The last thing you're going to have to do is disconnect your strut from the wire. This controls your electronic dampening. This plug is actually kind of hard to get out. They say that you're supposed to stick a little pin in that hole. There we go. They say that you're supposed to be able to stick a little pin in that hole and unplug this thing. I've been sticking stuff in there and I can't get it to unplug, so I'm just gonna have to fiddle with that and see how I can disconnect that. Once I disconnect that, then we'll go down to the wheel and see what needs to be disconnected from down there. Okay, so from down here in the wheel well, hopefully there's only one bolt that we have to remove, and that's down here at the bottom of the strut. Then we're gonna remove the top 3 bolts that I just showed you at the top of the strut. I just want to make a note that the dust boot on the rear is completely destroyed. I mean, this thing's obliterated. Looks like a pile of rubber bands. There's no reason why. This is a 6-year-old car. There's absolutely no reason why my dust boot should look like this. I would definitely say that that's a major design flaw from BMW. It could be an intentional design flaw for you know, planned obsolescence, but that's another topic. I feel like that's what BMW does to their customers these days, so that parts fail on schedule. But anyways, I'm not going to rant about that too much. That dust boot is destroyed. I don't have one to replace it with, so either I'm just going to rock with it or I'll come back later and do something. But anyways, on all of the M5 videos that I've seen, except for one, these folks get down here and they have to take the brakes off and disassemble part of the control arm in order to slide that thing out. But there is one guy who was able to shimmy this thing out without taking any of that stuff apart, and that's what I'm going to try to do today. Alright, so I went ahead and pulled out this foam block that was blocking everything. I couldn't see. Just like I told you guys, you wouldn't be able to see it. I did have to tear it a little bit. It's not a big deal. It's going to go back in just the way it was before. I just had to tear that little piece off. So anyways, these bolts do not go down the way that the front ones do. These come out like a traditional strut would. So all I got to do is finish unbolting these, and hopefully I'll be able to shimmy this strut out from where it's at. Alright folks, good news. I was able to get that out without taking a bunch of stuff apart. Just the single bolt down there at the bottom and the 3 bolts at the top. I do want to note what's going to happen is, so you're going to want to push the bottom towards the back that way, and kind of wiggle it around up top. What I ended up doing is making a small incision right here in the fender liner, just because the top of the strut is going to want to snag there. And the only reason I made that cut is because I didn't want to risk doing any damage to this wire. If this wire wasn't there, I could have just put a little bit more force on it and then pulled it down. But yeah, you just make yourself a little cut, just like that. It comes right out. Now looking at the top of this thing, we've got the nut down there with this wire coming out. This is definitely going to be a job for my pass-through socket set. I'm just hoping that I'm able to put enough torque on this thing to actually break that nut loose, because this part can tend to be a little bit difficult, and this is pretty much where I always use an impact wrench, and I'm not going to be able to do that this time. So ready for a fight, and let's see what happens. Alright folks, so it actually didn't put up too bad of a fight to get that nut started on the move, so it is moving. Unfortunately right now, a problem that I'm running into is it's causing the piston rod to spin, and it's not going to make any progress unless I can keep that rod still. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to grab up as far up to the top with a pair of vice grips to this rod as I can. This is definitely not something that you're going to want to do, but I don't really see any other options that I may have. Like I said, normally an impact gun will take that nut off without causing it to spin, but because of this wire I can't do that here. That's why I'm just grabbing this thing up as high as I possibly can, because it's going to put scratches in this thing, and that's going to hurt your shock over time if you were to do it lower down here. So up at the top, hopefully that's not going to impact any of the seals or anything, but again, like I said, I don't know any other way I could attack this. If you guys have better ideas, definitely leave it down in the comments for other folks who may be watching this in the future, and also for my knowledge as well. Alright folks, a couple more quick tidbits. I'm going to give you, first of all, I had to take it back apart, and I'll tell you about that in a second. But one thing I wanted to show you is when you take your rear springs out, you want to go ahead and put a mark on it that just basically helps you orient which way to put these things in, because these little pegs right here, they're not evenly spaced. So when you go to put it up there, you're going to have a really hard time lining it up, especially if you're just working with one person. Even if you have two people, you can't really see which way it's lining up because it's so close to the top of the trunk. So just make sure you have your orientation right. It's also got this arrow on it that you can see right here. That arrow actually faces towards the rear of the car. So that's two ways you can know. I prefer to just mark it so that that marking is facing me when it goes in and out the car. Secondly, I had to take it apart because they gave me the wrong springs with this kit. Well, actually, they gave me the wrong whole kit. So this is an M5 and M6 Grand Coupe kit, and that's probably the reason why I had to attach ratchet straps to compress my springs, because those springs are actually too large for this car. And once I got everything together, the car was jacked up like a monster truck. So I got on the phone with KW. I've got some new springs on the way. I'll show you the difference when they come in. Unfortunately, that's just going to be a loss for me. The springs are about $109 a piece. That plus overnight shipping, you know, it's a little bit of a setback, unfortunately, but got to get this car back on the road. I hate having broke cars sitting around. But anyways, it'll be 24 or so hours for me before I get this thing running again. But you guys will see me pulling this thing out the garage in just a second. Alright folks, we're back at it. I just got the new springs from KW. Shout out to KW. I got on the phone with the customer service representative. They provided awesome customer service. They got me what I needed. So the only difference between the two kits, I may have said already, is the springs. So this is the F06 spring for a M5 and an M6 Grand Coupe. This is the spring that I needed to have had. Anybody looking for more details, these are the respective part numbers. And as you can see, it's just a completely different spring. This one looks about, you know, maybe 2 inches shorter, and I'm not going to need any kind of a spring compressor or anything to put that spring on the strut. So go ahead and slap everything back together, get the car down, put it on the road, and try to wrap up this video. Alright folks, here is the end result, what it looks like. As you can see, there's pretty much no wheel gap up front, and there's a very slight wheel gap in the rear. So honestly, I like the way it looks now. I probably won't end up raising the car, but we'll see. Time will tell. Still have more stuff to put on here. So we're gonna go ahead and measure and see how much this actually came down. Okay, so I went ahead and took measurements. The way I measured was from the ground to the top of the fender. The way you're supposed to measure technically is from the middle of the hub to the top of the fender, but on my car it doesn't really matter. Just it's a more accurate way that's universal across cars if you go from the middle of the hub to the top fender. So anyways, going from the ground up, it's still going to give me the correct difference. Originally it was 28, right now it's 26 3/4. So I went down 1 1/4 in the front. You see what it was in the rear, and it looks like it only dropped 3/4 in the rear. I was expecting it to go a little bit more. Not that I need it to go a little bit more, but that's the amount of drop that you're looking at with the KW HAS kit. Now over time, these springs will settle as with any other springs, and it'll probably go down another 1/4 of an inch, both front and rear. I have actually had a car that dropped about an inch or more over the course of a year of driving. So like I said, these springs will probably go down maybe a 1/4 of an inch or a 1/2 an inch, and we'll get a little bit lower. So I'll just be keeping an eye on it, and you know, I can always adjust it back up to compensate for any unwanted drop, and we'll go from there. So as far as I know, this is the only video on YouTube, or only instructional period, for an F12 F13 BMW Coupe M6, and that shows how to install the KW HAS system, and it shows you some of the differences between this car and the M5 kit. So I hope this is able to help somebody, and we'll catch you next time.